Season 6, our first HD season. I'm not saying it's been a long slog going through the old seasons, but it's definitely a nice change of pace going to a full screen experience instead of the old aspect ratio. That being said, this season is still over a decade old, and it's very much a post 100 episode season, and it feels it. Not in a bad way, just in an evolutionary way. We're going to see everything really take another step closer to what we understand as modern American Dad. Stories are going to be more out there, there's more extreme and bizarre elements, and while there's a couple weaker episodes sprinkled throughout the season, overall it's just another really solid season of American Dad. So without further ado, let's get our kicks in Season 6. It's the 100th episode! I previously touched on how far the series had come in my Season 5 review, which you can find on my channel, and make sure to like and subscribe, hint hint wink wink nudge nudge, or if you're watching this in my compilation video, you just saw it. Hint hint to that coming soon if you're watching it on the Season 6 video. Look out for that, it'll be even better. But American Dad really does take its 100th episode seriously by promising to kill off 100 beloved American Dad characters, and even has a little counter at the bottom of the screen. I know I keep bringing it up, but it's really interesting that Family Guy in its 100th episode, Stewie Kills Lois / Lois Kills Stewie, Stan and Bullock actually show up. They did a whole celebrities talk about what episodes were their favorites, and it was a whole celebration. American Dad just kinda has this episode, and that's really it. It's aware that it's a 100th episode, it's celebratory, but it's entirely just American Dad, and deep down I actually kinda really respect that. Anyway, the story of the episode is simple. Jeff and Haley decide to run off and get married, so Stan and Francine offer a bounty to whoever can find the two and stop them from getting hitched. Steve and Roger team up as Wheels and the Leg Man, and we see a whole myriad of classic characters hunting the two down, wacky racist style. Avery and Reggie fight in a field, Principal Lewis gets some screen time, it's just great. Eventually, Jeff takes the money and agrees to not marry Haley, and then runs off with her and does it anyway, tricking Stan and, in it, earning his respect. There's also a scene where Brett Morris from Dope and Faith gets hit by Billy the Bullet and says he was Stan's satanic best friend in episode 302. Now, for those of you that don't know, season and episode orders are usually written in 3 or 4 digits. So an episode order for, say, season 8, episode 4 would be 804, which means Dope and Faith is canonically the second episode of the 3rd season, despite the fact it's listed as the 3rd episode of the season. Does it matter? No. But I have evidence that my season listings actually have some reasoning behind them other than just my preference. So, you know. There you go. Obviously, my win aside, there's a ton to like about 100 AD, but it's mostly in the jokes, and I'm not about to break down every one and why I like it so much. Compare 100 AD with Pilot. Look at how far the series has come and see how much more wild and yet familiar it is. The political satire is all but evaporated away, and now it's just a wacky family getting into insane adventures, and the series just feels that much more free because of it. They take out 100 characters, and in a way, it's like a cleansing bus crash fire that allows it to rise like an American phoenix. They're burning away the old ways and letting the new ones settle their roots. 100 AD is a brilliantly burning 10 out of 10 that shows why American Dad to this day just has so much heart and creativity. It was built on a foundation of care, compassion, and a family that at the end of the day loves each other and wants to be a family. And then we get Son of Stan. The A story is Stan and Francine arguing that they could raise Steve better with their own individual parenting styles rather than together, while Roger continues to hunt down Haley and Jeff on their honeymoon to take the money Stan paid them in the previous episode. Francine then has Steve cloned into 2 separate Steves so that the two can test and see which one is the better parent. Francine's Steve, the more traditional Steve, becomes even more of a sex pest pervert, and Stan's becomes a grade A psychopath, while they both agree that their unique parenting styles complement one another and they need each other to raise their family. There's really not much to talk about with the episode. It's like a 6 or a 7 out of 10 that is enough of a continuation of 100 AD that I'd be willing to call it one of the 4 two-part episodes of the entire series, but that's really about it. It feels like it's wrapping up loose ends more than anything. I don't know. I've never been particularly a big fan of Son of Stan, though I do like the Roger bits quite a bit. Meh! It's Halloween in Langley! Stan has to compete with Buckle for the best haunted house in the neighborhood when Buckle reminds us that he was a Disney Imagineer, which I just gotta say, great continuity. Those one-off jokes matter throughout American Dad, and I don't know, I think it adds an extra layer to the show. If you pay attention to it, there's so many small details that just keep coming back and feel so deserved. You feel like you're getting an extra layer to the show. The B story follows Steve and Akiko, Toshi's sister, going trick-or-treating and him developing a crush on her. Toshi then begins to hunt the two down. While they're having their fun, Stan decides to one-up Buckle by getting actual serial killers from the CIA and putting them on display, only to have Roger break them out and they start to terrorize the neighborhood. Steve and Akiko go to a party and Toshi eventually hunts them down when Akiko leaves with another boy, forcing Steve to leave with Toshi. Honestly, I really enjoy Best Little Whorehouse. It's a solid 8 out of 10. That's a great little Halloween episode, and we really don't get a ton of those throughout the series run. It's a nice touch that didn't need to be as entertaining as it was. Ah yes, Stan's Food Restaurant. Stan is overly critical of the restaurants he and Francine go to, and when she confronts him about it, he tells her about the restaurant he was taken to after his dad left and how it impacted his life. They then run into Roger, and he encourages Stan to follow his dream of opening his own restaurant. The B story has Steve running into the new girl at school who promises to go on a date with him if he can find a date for her best friend, and wait, doesn't that sound a little familiar? If you said that's just a season 1 B story done again, you'd be absolutely right, except instead of it being an ugly girl, Steve brings Snot over to go on a date with a doll, and yeah, it just kinda escalates from there. Roger then helps Stan build his restaurant, and when they begin to have creative differences, the two open competing restaurants, and eventually Roger ends up burning down Stan's restaurant to collect the insurance money. The B story goes to some pretty uncomfortable places that I don't really feel like getting into and revisiting all these years later. It does get rougher to watch each time. That's not to say the episode is bad by any means. It's definitely still an 8 out of 10 with a lot of great jokes and flashback scenes. We also get, I'm pretty sure, the first appearance of Quilo, the Laotian chef, but also a wild thing and something I can't believe I didn't notice before. I've been watching American Dad since it first started in 2005. I've seen Stan's Food Restaurant easily over 10 times. I didn't notice until like last year that Roger's persona in this episode is just Gordon Ramsay. Yeah, they never draw attention to it. He never does like a voice for it or anything. It's just super passive and it shines because of it. Honestly, Stan's Food Restaurant feels like such a good first episode of a season. It feels like the first proper American Dad episode of season 6, where 100 AD and Son of Stan were more of like a 2-parter, more of a 1.5-parter, and then you have the Halloween special. Stan's Food Restaurant feels like the actual first fleshed together episode of the entire season, and it's a really solid outing. Francine is upset about Stan pushing off their issues, and he proposes that they go to a therapist. Only it's actually a hypnotist that he makes repress her memories. The hypnotist Sal is actually voiced by Jason Alexander, aka George Costanza on Seinfeld. When Stan goes to get a sandwich, he blows Sal off yet again, and has always refused to do anything nice for him, so when he returns, Sal makes Francine remember everything Stan's had him repress for years, including her desire to be a stand-up comic. The B story follows Steve winning a new fish and giving it to Klaus, who makes it his bride, only she doesn't talk or do anything and eventually ends up eating their kids like a fish, does. Roger ends up becoming Francine's agent, and before long they book her on her own sitcom where Stan fears he's going to lose her to her newfound popularity. He begins to change and does everything she wanted because he doesn't want to lose her, and she explains she just wanted to talk about them with him, and they make up on the set of her show. It's a very wholesome and sweet conclusion to the episode, and I'm glad we get those moments where Stan and Francine reconcile and the relationship grows stronger because of it. It's nice to have an anime couple that don't want to kill each other. White Rice is an all-around solid 8 out of 10 that delivers on everything it's trying to achieve. The B story is pretty light, but overall the jokes still land really wonderfully. It's an American Dad Thanksgiving! and this might be one of the worst episodes of the entire show, bar none. Stan's half-brother, who is Native American, visits with his family, and Stan and the family try and impress them with how incredible their house is because they think he's poor. What they don't know is that Stan's brother ended up finding a silver mine on the land their grandfather gave him, and is actually insanely rich. I just want to say, it's not a bad episode because of Stan's brother or anything. He's actually played wonderfully by Lou Diamond Phillips, but it's to the service of one of just the most uncomfortable episodes. The Smiths get invited to Rusty's house for the following Thanksgiving, get humbled, and try and take their house from them. It's just really not great. I will say it's the second appearance of the airport security guard voiced by JB Smoove, who would make several more appearances throughout the show as different characters, and Stan's grandpa's voiced by Ed Asner, who would also play different roles. But that's really the only things of any merit to the episode. Like, the Smiths are just unapologetically horrible, and it fails on every level. There Will Be Bad Blood is like a 2 out of 10 that you can just kind of skip over and never look back at. Stan is tired of Roger always getting away with his schemes when he has to follow the law and be an upstanding member of society. He's elated when he gets jury duty, and when he sees that Roger is the one on trial, he makes it his mission to see that he's put behind bars for his crimes. The B story is... okay. Jeff is... There is really no easy way to put this. Jeff needs to smoke the Mary Jane, or else he has too high of a libido and ends up churning the butter, as it were. Chronically. He chronically churns butter. I'm not getting demonetized over a B story. So yeah, Francine tells Jeff he can't smoke in the house, and he starts to lose it, and they have to figure out how to fix it. Meanwhile, Stan manages to get Roger sent to jail, and Roger proceeds to break out, causing Stan to chase him down and get him to face the consequences of his actions. It's a really clever idea for a Stan and Roger episode that I'm surprised hasn't really been done before. You could argue Office Spaceman kinda did it, but here it's very much Roger's personas having real-world implications, and it's become obvious that Roger's committed a ton of crimes under these different guises. It's actually really neat that he's found the time to do all this, and that will be built on later on, but it's just really, again, they have so much freedom to write Roger how they want to, and it just kind of shines because of it. Meanwhile, this is all while Francine eases up on the house rules and crushes a 2-liter while hanging out with Jeff so that he doesn't have to get certain thoughts while staring at bottles of Aunt Jemima. All in all, The People vs. Martin Sugar is a wonderful 9, even 10 out of 10, that while I wish it didn't just briskly conclude, it works for the story they're telling. Also, Steve has like one line in the entire episode, but it might be the funniest line that the entire episode has. It's really just crackerjack writing that shines through. It's another Christmas episode! Only this time it's not the Rapture and it's not a what-if scenario. No, this is a very real Smith family Christmas. Stan refuses to acknowledge Jeff as part of the family and shuns him whenever he gets the chance. He also decides to get Steve a gun for Christmas, and they take it to go shooting, where Steve accidentally shoots what they think is a mall Santa, until they begin to get very cryptic messages that reveal that they actually shot the real Santa, and he's healing at the North Pole to come back and get his revenge. The B story follows Roger being guided by a liquor store owner, voiced by Clancy Brown, to find Bob Todd Williams, the greatest moonshiner that ever lived, and proceeds to learn from his wacky mountain ways. And sure enough, as soon as Christmas comes around yet again, Santa's armies come for the Smith family. Stan and the clan retreat to Bert's plane, turned house up in the mountains with Roger, and they begin their counteroffensive, fighting off hordes of elves, flying reindeer, and polar bears, while Santa tries to coax Jeff to join him and slay Stan. However, Jeff betrays and stabs Santa to save the family, because even if Stan hates him, he's still family in his eyes because he's Haley's dad, and he wouldn't let anything happen to him. It's really sweet, and while Stan does kind of come around, it's really more a celebration of Jeff as a character and really humanizes him. Season 6 really is the season of Jeff becoming a solidified main character and them figuring out what to do with him, and I genuinely love it. I think they've taken the proper time with Jeff to give him plenty of B stories and inclusion in the family that makes this feel much more natural. For Whom the Sleigh Bell Tolls also starts the evil/vengeful Santa arc, where the Smith family will continue to run up against Santa in varying degrees throughout the years. Believe me when I say it's a 10 out of 10 Christmas episode and one of the best that American Dad can provide. It's so out there, but makes so much sense for where American Dad is right now. I love this episode so much, and what it sets up and how it's built on later is just so brilliant. Like, this is how you make a foundation for a recurring arc. Much like the Golden Turd that we talked about previously, that really, it's had some cameos, but it won't really appear for another few seasons. Here, For Whom the Sleigh Bell Tolls, the actions and consequences of this episode will actually play into future Christmas episodes in the next 1 or 2 seasons. It's a phenomenal episode that you should not skip. Francine is bored with her day-to-day life, and after Roger gets bad gas from dinner and effectively gasses the house, the family gets put up in a 5-star hotel where they can take a break and live a little. Francine decides to have some fun with Roger and takes on a whole new persona as Sarah Blanche and begins pretending to be a concrete salesman. The concierge in this episode is actually played by Hector Elizondo, and we also get the return of J.K. Simmons and Will Forte in bit roles. There's also a character that Steve interacts with in the B story that I'm pretty sure is the first appearance of the amazing Alan Tudyk in the series, but he will become a much more recurring character actor as the series goes on. The B story follows Steve being enchanted by a painting and trying to go into a hypnotic trance so he can go back in time and find out who the woman in the painting is, only to discover that it was himself. Francine realizes that though her life may be mundane from time to time, she wouldn't trade it for her family for anything and goes back to get her old life back. All this while Stan is stuck in the hotel room trying to figure out what socks to wear. The episode is absolutely terrific and is worth watching and rewatching time after time. There's just so many elements that work, and I don't know, there's a magic to Fart Break Hotel. It reminds me a lot of Ice and Men, where you have this side story that's going on, and it works so well because Stan isn't a part of it. American Dad, without Stan, the American Dad, does some really cool things. Like we saw in Escape from Pearl Bailey or Bar Mitzvah Hustle, where we got Steve-centric episodes. Now we're getting a Francine what-if scenario. It's got great Roger bits, it's got great Francine, great Steve, and again, like, Hector Elizondo elevates the episode entirely. I don't know what it is, it's like he loved the show, or he loved the character he was playing, and he brings such a dynamite performance that it feels so lived. Much like Forrest Whitaker when he played Agent Turlington, it feels like they're not just guest characters going, "That's right, I am American quarterback, I don't know, Peyton Manning, and I too love The Simpsons." It's just their characters, and they play those characters so well that this episode that could have fallen on its face and been like, oh, well, that's just, Scott Grimes playing the concierge. Here you have Hector Elizondo crushing it. Absolutely. I don't know. He adds a magic to the episode that I can't ignore, and I had to talk about. The episode as a whole is a solid 9, maybe even 10 out of 10. It really does not have any faults. Stan and Francine begin to feel old, and so they try and pick up new hobbies and go to shows, but when they realize they don't have any friends, they eventually meet a young couple, Tom and Cam, played by Anthony Michael Hall and Sarah Chalk. However, the young couple are super active, and Stan and Francine struggle to keep up with their active lifestyles. The B story is okay, like the A story is great, don't get me wrong. The A story is solid, it's got a lot of really funny bits, but the B story is so amazing because literally nothing happens. Steve and Roger get a cotton candy gun, and when it doesn't work, they decide to call in and get a refund and stay on the line for days, only to remember that Roger bought the gun with Terry's credit card, and they effectively wasted all that time for nothing because Klaus tricked them into thinking it was worth it, which might be the greatest Klaus scheme of all time, and I love it so much. Vindictive Klaus is just amazing. He knows how to put the fear into people, and I gotta give him credit where credit is due. They know how to make Klaus both the smartest and dumbest person in any room, and it's brilliant. Anyway, Stan and Francine begin to try and sabotage Tom and Cam to get them to slow down, and it ultimately backfires and they realize they don't need to be anything they aren't. I didn't want to go too in-depth on the episode because the A story can be a bit sensitive for people, so definitely watch it at your own discretion, but the jokes are brilliant and the delivery is top-notch. I cannot emphasize enough how well Scott Grimes, Seth MacFarlane, Rachel McFarlane, and D. Bradley Baker have gotten their voices down for Steve, Roger, Klaus, Haley, and of course, Francine is always terrific, done by the incredible Wendy Schall. I mean, they've had over 100 episodes, but it's just important to note that they are nailing these voices, they're nailing these characters, and it's elevated because of it. The whole cast is terrific, but Klaus's evolution here really is something for the books. Stanny Boy and Frantastic is a solid 8 out of 10. Roger gets the lead in a play called A Piñata Named Desire. Meanwhile, Stan says that he can do anything that Roger can do and proceeds to show that he can't act when he bungles a CIA undercover mission, and Roger catches him in the act. Stan then proceeds to take Roger's acting class to learn how to act and gets cast in A Piñata Named Desire as well. The B story follows Steve and the gang realizing they're too old for sleepovers and decide to throw one last hurrah. We get little entourage, we get Ronnie, played by Terry Crews, and Nick Kroll playing a jamais salesman, and everything about this episode just kinda works. Stan and Roger especially have this very solid, competitive, and yet nurturing relationship in this episode that really keeps escalating in on itself. And as it builds, eventually, Stan and Roger eventually perform together, and their built-up tension overflows on stage, and yeah, things happen. A Piñata Named Desire is another dynamite Stan and Roger episode that really shows why that dynamic works so well. Like, think about it. When's the last time there was a genuine and bona fide Brian and Peter episode in Family Guy? An episode that, better or worse, just focused on those two. They're so few and far between, but American Dad keeps its revolving Roger door swinging, so you always remember the dynamics and how the different characters play off of each other. I think A Piñata Named Desire is essential American Dad viewing and a hearty 10 out of 10. The B story can lag a bit in places, but honestly, Barry really kinda saves it. Like, I haven't talked much about them, but Eddie K. Thomas has progressively just been giving better and better lines as Barry, and at first the delivery may have been jarring. Now you almost wait for Barry to say the funniest line in the group or even the episode. I think Home-a-Drone is when it really started to pick up steam, and he really hasn't slowed down. I know he's a very minor part of the episode, but it can't be ignored. I mean, also, who doesn't love the little entourage, though? Oh, yeah! Look, we've had a good run, right? Where other seasons have peaks and valleys, Season 6 really just has a crater. Outside of There Will Be Bad Blood, we've had a delightful, magical season full of great stories, wonderful jokes, and an elevated idea of what American Dad can be. And now we're at You Det Your Life. Stan saves Roger's life yet again and feels he's finally done enough to make up for Roger saving his life back at Area 51, and so Stan and Roger get into a fight and eventually Roger moves out, only to be replaced by a new tenant, Andy Dick, played by Nick Kroll, which is surprising because, I don't know, you would think Andy Dick would have done it. I mean, obviously he can't do it anymore, but it's not like he was a big star at the time. Also, Nick Kroll is in a lot more this season than I remember. It's just really interesting to me to see him popping up like this. Good for him. I may not like everything he's done, but I can respect that Kroll hustle. The A story is really nothing worth talking about and just kind of drones on, but the B story is pretty great. Steve gets tasked with working the PA for the morning announcements and goes mad with power as the students believe and do whatever he tells them. However, not only does Steve, but everyone forgets that they're holding the button and effectively have a ton of hot mic incidents. You Det Your Life is not the worst episode of the season. It's tolerable, it's fine. The B story really saves the middling A story, and it's maybe a 5 out of 10. 10, but that's the thing about a crater. This is just the decline. We're not at the bottom of the crater yet or anything, buddy. Hey, bud. Welcome. This is it. This is the bottom of the crater. This is the worst episode of the season, bar none. I can defend an element of any other episode of the season and of the last season, but I Am the Walrus deserves nothing and gets nothing. I would not write these scripts. I would not take this time if I didn't love American Dad from the bottom of my heart. And I genuinely believe that more people should celebrate this show. I've studied animation and its impact on society. I've watched countless shows, and I still think American Dad is one of the funniest and best written shows out there. And still, I think I Am the Walrus might be one of, if not the worst episode of American Dad of all time. Stan feels he needs to assert his dominance around Steve to make sure that he doesn't forget who runs the house, and so he begins sleeping with Francine in front of him. Oh, but don't worry, the B story isn't any better. Jeff and Haley decide to go to relationship counseling with Principal Lewis, who proceeds to hold them hostage while they clean his house so that they can bond and understand the importance of teamwork. Kevin Michael Richardson is legitimately the only good thing about this whole episode. I detest that I Am the Walrus exists. Like, there's an episode in the next season I just struggle to watch because it's so haunting, but at least there's some merit to it. But this is unnecessary. I Am the Walrus is a 1 out of 10. It hurts to say it, but yeah, it's one of the lowest points of the entire show. If you like it, I don't hate you, and I'm sure there's a way to justify the episode, but in my book, there's just nothing to like about it. Truly, it is the bottom of the bottom. And now, as we climb out of the crater that is I Am the Walrus, we have School Lies! Stan tries to get in with Senator Buckingham to hopefully get a promotion at the CIA. The senator is played by the late great Burt Reynolds, and Stan has Steve go to the same private school as the senator's daughter until Steve begins sneaking out, so he replaces him with Roger. Steve, on the other hand, joins a female gang, the Chicas Ficas. I really, really love how Steve is just so passive in this episode, and it's all because the school got contaminated with some kind of chemical. It's never really established, but just there's so much charm in the absurdity of this episode. Like, a janitor gets swallowed by a sandworm. Roger comes home from school beaten black and blue, and he reveals to Stan that he sold the senator's daughter to a drug dealer, and so Stan has to get her back and choose between his family and his career all over again. School Lies is a perfectly fine middle-of-the-ground episode that doesn't really do anything spectacularly. That being said, anything after I Am the Walrus would probably be better than what we got with I Am the Walrus, and School Lies is probably closer to a 6 or a 7 out of 10 that you can watch a few times, but it does kind of outstay its welcome. It's got some great Steve delivery and some good shock moments, and it even has a really great guest appearance by Ron Perlman, but it's, you know, outside of the really ridiculous jokes, the episode itself is just kind of there. It just feels kind of bland and in place. Hey, we've trudged ourselves out of that crater. We did it, gang. I'm proud of you. Welcome to License to Till. Steve and the gang help Snot harvest his uncle's cabbage patch, where one of the cabbages is voiced by H. John Benjamin. They start to work on it when Roger and Klaus make a bet at the mall on how long it would take Roger to make Steve cool at school, which delivers one of the greatest scenes featuring a Mickey Avalon song ever animated. The B story has Stan trying to prank Francine to add some surprise and spice back into their marriage. Steve eventually abandons Snot and the gang when they need him the most and steals the tractor to ferry the cool kids around from party to party. And as he's getting ready to take them, he loses a lens from his glasses and Snot comes to the rescue, so he'll come to the rescue with the Cabbage Patch until they actually run out of gas. Francine does eventually get Stan back with the pranks, which is honestly so great to see, but they both take it to such a degree that they end up crashing the car into a neighbor's garage and need to call a truce. It's also tragically the end of The Tiny Assassin. License to Till is a very hit or miss episode. You're either going to absolutely love it, you're going to quote it, you're going to have the Mickey Avalon song stuck in your head and be singing along time after time, or you're just going to totally hate it, can't stand it, and not put it on any list. Personally, I'm just bored by it. I personally think it goes on too long. It doesn't really do anything, and I'm not a huge fan of Snot and Steve's centric A stories. It's just not for me. I never really got it. It's like a 6 or 7 out of 10, though. That just feels like you've seen it before, even when you haven't. We open to a flashback where we see a very young Snot is in love with Haley and how Steve has been the leader of their group since they were little. Snot is still infatuated with Haley in the modern day, but obviously she's married to Jeff, but he's not going to let that stop him. He takes out all his bar mitzvah money and puts on a grand display to try and win Haley's love, and ultimately fails and spirals into a deep depression when he's introduced to Steve's cousin, Jenny from the block, who, yeah, is just Roger in disguise. However, Snot comes back with an air of confidence he didn't have before and reveals he's no longer a virgin and becomes the new leader of the group as they plan their new friendscursion. The B story follows Stan wanting to live a life just like in Bewitched, the only problem being he can't handle his booze. He progressively loses more and more control and his grip on reality, as Steve loses his group and confronts Roger, who tries to reclaim his leadership, even proving Snot was still a virgin because Roger got creative with a stress ball. Eventually, Roger and Snot make up and are about to give it another shot when Jenny is hit by a bus and killed. This, of course, just being Roger moving at super speed to try and make it look like Jenny had died. The B story can be wrapped up summarily with just, itwaswitches.com. Jenny from the block is a satisfying exhale after driving past a waste treatment plant. You know every inhale after this point is going to be okay. The episode is a solid 9 out of 10 that feels like a return to form as we round the corner on the last few episodes of the season. It's also more of Snot being involved in the A story that will become more and more prevalent as the series continues, but I actually don't have a problem with it here. It fits the character, it feels like a proper Snot story, and it doesn't feel like they're just trying to shoehorn in elements that they couldn't find for other characters. Greg and Terry remodeled their house and brag about the strength of their relationship, which causes Stan and Francine to get jealous and a little competitive due to their belief they're a super strong couple, and so they plan a kitchen renovation of their own. The B story follows Steve and the crew getting picked up by Principal Lewis when Barry shows he can count cards, and he decides to use them to make money at an underground casino. It's really nice that we're seeing more and more of Principal Lewis. Next season is when we'll really get to see Lewis as a main character, but seeing these hints of him being a major part of the show has been terrific to see. Naturally, Stan and Francine start to disagree and ultimately build a wall in the middle of the house, separating the renovations from each other, and that's really about it. They begin to miss one another, tear down the wall, and agree that they have a strong relationship, just not when it comes to renovation. Meanwhile, the boys get kicked out of an underground betting den when Principal Lewis is found out, and it's just the same as like 21. The episode is really just kind of there. There's a funny musical number. Kevin Michael Richardson does a terrific job yet again, but honestly, the stories are there for the sake of the jokes. The jokes are super solid. There's tons of things to love about the comedy in the episode. It's just there's not really much of a core to the episode. It's just two good, albeit predictable stories covered, almost smothered, with great comedy. Homewreckers is a fine 8 out of 10. You ever see a little show called The Office? We actually get an intro, cold open, and a special Office-style intro for the CIA. The episode is really clever because not only do they have the interview segments you'd expect in an episode of The Office, but also the wobbling camera effect of a mockumentary-style show, which, honestly, I'm very impressed with being in an animated series. Lorraine shows up again, played by the great Niecy Nash, and we also get 3 Dutch agents that are totally not spies, led by Ken Jeong. The B story follows Roger drumming up business for Steve's birdhouse business, however he uses shoddy materials and causes the houses to implode to Steve's horror. Francine talks with Bullock and actually ends up getting a job at the CIA. When she starts stealing attention away from Lorraine, Lorraine retaliates by throwing acid on her face, disfiguring her. Stan, seeing his wife upset and her face half missing, sacrifices his thunder buns to give her the skin graft for her face. I'm skipping over a lot of the episode because it really needs to be seen and appreciated. As far as parodies go, Flirting with Disaster is just so perfectly done. It takes elements from The Office, absolutely, but you can see how it could just as easily be a traditional episode of American Dad, and the fact that the B story isn't done in The Office style makes it feel that much more intentional. I encourage everyone to check it out, even if they, like myself, can't really stand The Office, because it's just a clever way of spicing up the story, which is great considering what will come in Season 7, including one of the most divisive episodes of the entire show. Flirting with Disaster is a great 9 out of 10. The Roger and Steve B story is a little rough to watch with the Bird family, but I don't know, I think because it's so over the top and Greg and Terry's reaction is just so blasé, it works perfectly. And here we are, the season finale, Gorillas in the Mist. The A story follows Stan getting upset that he has to be a parent all the time and responsible for Steve. But when Steve sneaks out to go on a houseboat party with Stan and the two have a good time, he starts to ease up and the two become more friends than father and son. The B story follows Roger trying to prove to Haley that it's easy to become a country music star and goes about setting up the ideal country lifestyle with an ugly wife and a trailer and everything. Eventually, Stan and Steve's lax relationship gets Steve stuck in a gorilla enclosure, and Stan and Steve realize that the relationship works when Stan puts his foot down and is the adult in the relationship, and Steve understands that his dad is only like that because he cares about him. As episodes go, Gorilla in the Mist is decent enough. It's probably around an 8 out of 10. It's not really a strong season finale, but there's definitely worse episodes to go out on. It's not threatening joint custody or even Great Space Roaster as the best finale episodes of the seasons, but it's a decent enough outing, all things considered. And there we go! That's Season 6 in a nutshell. Overall, the season takes its move to full screen HD and runs with it. Each season has felt like an evolution off the one previously, but Season 6 and Season 7 especially feel very expansive and expressive. We saw Jeff take more of a central role in the family, the inclusion of the literal war on Christmas, and even got a pseudo two-parter. While yes, there was the crater and a Thanksgiving special we won't talk about again, Season 6 gave us some outstanding episodes of American Dad. But what were your favorite episodes? Least favorite? Was I wrong about any of them? Let me know in the comments below. We only have 3 more seasons before we're out of the Fox era, and it feels so surreal to be so close to the end. However, that doesn't mean we don't have a ton to talk about with Season 7. A controversial episode, a network-wide event, and an episode starring Saul Goodman himself? Oh yeah, it's gonna be fun. And like always, if you enjoy the videos, consider liking, subscribing, joining our Patreon, Discord, or Twitch, or even following me on Twitter. And remember, don't go to heaven. We've still gotta talk about Season 7. Goodbye, everybody!